Good? Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our intimate session here. If you want to, by the way, feel free to come on up closer. We won't bite, as Eileen said.
Yeah.
We're happy to have everybody on one of the final sessions here on a Friday afternoon, as we look forward to everybody wrapping up Rising, I'm sure. So very excited. Actually, I will say this is a treat for you all because I'm joined with a very amazing group here. I'm pretty excited about this panel. So excited to introduce these individuals. We're going to talk about HR operating models being transformed by AI, what they've done to leverage AI in their respective companies. I'm also excited about this because we have three very different industries represented: automotive, airlines, and healthcare. And we'll explore the differences, we'll explore the similarities, and we'll talk about how they're leveraging AI in their different cases. So with that said, let's introduce our esteemed panel. So if everybody could go around real quick, maybe introduce yourselves. We'll start with Greg.
Sure. Greg Muccio. I am the head of talent acquisition for Southwest Airlines. I've been there a little over 22 years and excited to be here.
Great. Hi, everyone. Eileen Kowalski. I lead our global candidate experience team, which is a newfangled way to say TA operations.
And welcome, everyone. I'm Tom Nestrick. I'm the Senior Vice President and Associate Chief People Officer for Advent Health in Orlando, Florida.
All right. Well, I'm not really that important. I'm Jason. I'm the Chief Business Officer here at HiredScore. We're one of the AI partners for our panel. I've been with HiredScore for going on about 7 years. Been in the broader TA tech and HR tech ecosystem for the last 15 years. So a pleasure to be joined by our group. We will, just real quick, there's times where we may allude to, from a safe harbor standpoint, we may get into things that the companies are working on, HiredScore is working on, so just a general safe harbor. But I think with that, we will dive right into our agenda. So we covered introductions. Let's get into some of our fun topics. We'll keep this really engaging, then we'll open it up for a couple questions at the end. And we'd love to hear from you guys on any questions for this group. So we'll start off, no particular order. So if we look at HR, we're seeing massive amounts of transformation happening across our customers. Probably you've heard a lot of that theme this week and obviously observed it on your own. So one question for everybody is with transformation being so rapid, what's one of the most significant changes you've made or programs that you've launched that's driving innovation at your companies?
I guess I'll start with that one. So I think everybody in the audience would agree the impact that COVID has had on the labor environment, in particular working in healthcare, as you can imagine, the issues that we've encountered there, especially around labor shortages for nursing and other issues as far as travel agencies taking staff and so one after the other. So coming out of COVID, we've been forced to really look at, because at the same time my company was in extremely high growth mode, which posed two unique challenges. And we were forced to look at, in particular, there's a heavy focus on staffing and recruiting. And when we pulled all of our data together, we discovered that we didn't have any issues as far as filling that recruitment funnel or the top of the funnel as far as sourcing candidates. What we discovered was that our issues were actually more from an operational and efficiency stance. And what I mean by that is looking at your entire recruitment process from end to end and diagnosing that and figuring out where the challenges are. And what we discovered was our challenges were more so the process was too slow, to put it quite simply. I know everybody wants to speed up their process, but as I mentioned, in healthcare in particular, the competitive landscape in hiring clinicians in particular has just really become extremely difficult. And so we looked at everything as far as how long it was taking our recruiters to source candidates and send resumes over to our hiring leaders. And what we discovered was that our process was just, as I mentioned, just too slow. And so one of the biggest changes we made, we actually partnered with HiredScore and implemented their technology. And it really helped us. We're an early adopter still, but all of our signs from implementation within the last 6 months, I'll point out a particular statistic that I just looked at this week, particularly around our open requisitions. Within 90 days, our team has been able to close out double the percentage of those. And you're probably sitting there asking why. And it's because our recruiters aren't spending so much time opening up and reviewing every single resume that they get. And to put that in scale, at Advent Health, we hire approximately between external and internal hires about 35,000 people a year. So.
And Tom, there's two things you said there I think are interesting. One is how quickly you were able to see. So you're saying we launched 6 months ago, and with the AI implementation, you're already seeing those gains within the early 6 months. I think that's important. We've seen a lot as you think about transformations. People, when they make these bets, you see a lot of this technology, and I implement the technology. How long is it going to take before I can see results and get that time to value of implementing an AI? Is it going to be instant? Am I going to have to wait a long time? So especially in an industry like healthcare where those people are serving patients, it's great to hear how quickly that's making an impact. And for the audience, just because they may not know what you're doing with HiredScore, can you just explain what was the actual tool? Like, how are they using it to simplify their process?
Sure. So implementing AI technology into any organization, I mean, there's an adoption period, right? It's a different way of doing things, especially with your recruiting teams. And so early on, a lot of it had to do with training our recruiters to actually properly utilize the tool. And we're still working through that because we want to really ensure 100% utilization of that AI tool. And to put things in perspective, right now it's the only AI tool that we're actually using in our whole HR stack, whether it's in talent acquisition or our HR shared services center. And it's one that when we were looking at all the different functions in our HR model, we ended up going with HiredScore because we felt it would have the biggest impact in an area where we need it the most, which is in our hiring landscape. So hopefully that answered your question.
I think so, yeah. So back to the rest of the group. Biggest changes you're making that have had the biggest impact, Eileen?
Not very different to some of the challenges that you have, Tom. Speed, right? So it's all about speed. And I think while obviously we're in very different industries, a lot of the same problems, regardless of whether we are working on requisitions to fill high volume hourly or software engineers, it doesn't matter. Our candidates are in high demand, right? Whether it's due to a labor shortage and everyone's competing for the same type of skilled labor, or software engineers to go work at all of our competitor technology companies. And so some of the technology that we've put in our new tech stack for talent acquisition is very much around optimizing the time for our recruiters to make sure that they're using their time wisely, that they are getting to the candidates that we want to engage with as quickly as possible so that we can hook them and get them super excited about General Motors and come join our team. And so, again, very, very similar in terms of challenges.
Eileen, one difference was you had actually at GM, you all decided to implement Tom talked about one AI tool. I think you all decided to implement several tools.
We do have
Any
several.
lessons from that?
Don't do it all at the same time. Yeah, so big lesson learned, right? Don't do it all at the same time. There's a lot of change, right? 2021 was a big year for General Motors. We really started our transformation in TA, and so it was a lot all at once. But I will say one of the benefits that I think our team is really, and General Motors as a whole is benefiting from, is the ability to recirculate candidates that have pre-existing interest in your company, right? So how many of you have an ATS and a CRM, and you have LinkedIn, and you have these talent pipelines all over the place? It's nice to be able to give your recruiting team a place where everything comes in together, right? So we've really taken the time that recruiters were spending in multiple tools and brought it into one. So it's kind of like one-stop shopping. It's really nice. And we have the ability to present to our recruiters, like, here's some candidates that meet the basic qualifications of your rec, but also are interested in this company because they've either been previous applicants or they've joined our talent community. And so being able to bring those all back to a recruiter's desk quickly is a game changer for us.
Greg?
I will say, I think something that I'm really excited about that we launched in the last couple of years is our career mobility team. I'm sure everybody that's listening to our voices, your internals mean a lot, and everyone likes to say, hey, we like to promote from within. Then what do you do, right? And how do those internals know about those opportunities, not just actually when you need them, but even beforehand. And so we created a literal team. Think of it like a career center at a college, and their sole purpose is just helping Southwest employees explore new career opportunities. And I think when you have a large organization, we're 78,000, all across the country, what the automation and AI and the tools have been able to do is help us serve more internals in a more speed time frame, like what we talked about, but also in kind of their space as well, if that makes sense.
I love what they've done at Southwest. One of the questions we talk about with customers going through these innovation journeys is what new roles will you need in a post-AI HR operating world? In other words, today we have recruiters, recruiting coordinators, we have sourcers, will those roles stay the same? We have hiring managers do certain things in these different personas. We have certainly the internal mobility side, we have HRBPs play a role, we have talent management plays a role. So I love what Greg's done because it sort of starts to say, hey, how am I shifting what people are doing to drive an outcome? You wrap that in an AI to be able to actually help those people potentially do that quicker, faster, but now you're enabling a whole new opportunity that didn't exist in the organization. So I love that. Very cool. I talk about that one a lot. All right, we're going to move on to our next question. And real quick, any changes coming really quick? Just kind of a firing question. Any other changes planned that you're really excited about coming up for anybody?
So for us, again, I mentioned we implemented a brand new tech stack. Next year, right, so beginning of the year, what we'll really start focusing on is how do we optimize that tech stack and make sure that everybody knows what to use, when to use it, why they should use it, and what the expected ROI will be coming out of that tool.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of technology. I think there's a theme out there. Maybe, can I take the things I have, simplify that? If I am going to add something, make sure, again, it gets you value quickly. So those are some common themes. We'll move on to our next question. So what are some of the new things that you're measuring or new goals that you've set for the team? We hear about some of the sort of age-old metrics are kind of shifting. Maybe the things we used to measure aren't going to serve us anymore. So any metrics or goals that you've all set in your organizations that are driving innovation, either through technology or through the people being accountable to these goals?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in on that one as well. So my first answer related to staffing and talent acquisition, but if you read any poll from CEOs, it's still on their radar as one of the biggest challenges they face, right, this year and even into next year. And I mentioned we hire about 35,000 candidates per year. Our company's right under 100,000, so and still in growth mode. And another thing that we're looking at from a KPI stance is while we have our funnels are pretty full, our talent strategy team does a wonderful job at branding and being able to attract candidates. I mentioned we use AI in the form of HiredScore on some of the processes. But the other HR component that we discovered is when we're looking at, we have all these volume of candidates coming in, we had to pause and look at in certain markets across the 9 states we operate in, is our candidate conversion rates and our offer acceptance rates. And in certain markets, we had lower candidate conversion rates and lower offer acceptance rates. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. When we traced it back and tied it back, it's because it was directly related to or correlated to our compensation plans. And so we don't have a fully, I would say, harmonized compensation plan across our 50 plus hospitals. And it really forced us to look at and make adjustments in certain markets to compensation and change our entire compensation philosophy, where now we're looking at it statistically several times a year to make sure that we're in the right, I'd say, range of where we want to be as an organization, whether it's in the median or 75th percentile of pay for certain groups. And we've gotten very specific on targeting areas as far as those hard to fill jobs that all of us have, regardless of which industry you work in. And so that's what we discovered as far as measuring new KPIs. We've really taken it down to, we tied it into recruiting and then switched, focused on compensation after that because it had a direct correlation.
I love that because you spend so much time, thinking of top of funnel, how we drive conversion, and then you get through the entire process, and there's this important thing called pay that you forget and actually can be a huge differentiator in whether all of that conversion comes to fruition. So I think it's a great call out. Greg, what are some metrics that have been meaningful at Southwest?
Yeah, I think this past year and starting really the year before, two big ones that we've kind of begun to really track and focus a lot is applications to offer and applications to hire, right? And so talking about extending that funnel even higher, right, if you will. And what's helpful with that is, with the use of the tools that we have, we can certainly see that across all roles at Southwest, but I can also break it down by role and by location. And then that becomes very, very powerful, not only for how I guide my team on what we're doing and what those expectations should be, right? Because you get into it that I think in our world, it's so much, candidate and customer really can begin to start to merge, right? And so how many leads would you need in order to get a customer to buy your product, right? Well, same thing. How many leads do you need of candidates to ultimately fill roles? And so it's really powerful kind of understanding that so is our level of effort appropriate? But when you start looking at it and be able to dissect it by role and location, you get some very valuable information that you can share upwards, right? Because, for example, if, I have data that will show, well, what are those numbers for ramp agents here at SFO, right? Versus Dallas versus Chicago. And if we've got a big variance, then we can also maybe answer some questions. Well, what's going on there that we could possibly remedy? And for us, it's been things from, paid media into that area to, potentially looking at higher hourly rates, paid parking, just whatever it is that we can make a difference.
I love that. Eileen, anything come to mind for you?
I think really some of the things that we're focusing on is taking our old traditional KPIs and metrics like time to fill and time to interview and modernizing them to be able to really help us keep everybody on track in terms of, are all of these things that we've put into place, all of this tech stack, is this benefiting our team? Is it benefiting our hiring managers? And so, I think, again, in terms of transformation, we're in this incredible whirlwind of change at GM. Everything that we do in terms of changing the way we traditionally recruit to being able to attract much different types of candidates. And so part of that transformation is really modernizing how we're measuring and what we're measuring, and then what do we do with that information?
Tom and Greg, putting you on the spot, were there any metrics you found that were less useful to keep looking at that you guys tossed away?
I don't know if we fully tossed it because it's one of those ones that, people, it's a dog with a bone kind of thing. You can't get it out. But I think the time to fill is interesting. And one of the things was we hire to a lot of classes, right? So all of our operational roles. And so I finally got why do you care? What you should care about is I had 20 seats to fill and you needed a roster 1 week out. Did I or did I not? Did we do that? That's all that matters. If it took us 2 days to do that or 22 days to do that, that's my problem to kind of work out. But it gets really skewed, and then, and why that can get skewed if companies that have that is, I have class dates months out, right? And so I have a candidate that's, because they haven't started yet, because they're in a class 4 months, that clock's ticking, right? And so to me, that's kind of one of them. And it's also for me that long-term piece is not as critical to me as being able to look at the segments of that and really measure the time between when you applied and when we touched, when we had a first interview to second, those buckets actually matter more to me than the big picture piece of it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. There was a client, not with us today, but they had a goal in their retail locations to drop their time to fill, but actually the thing they found was, and they dropped it, by the way, from 43 to 18 days, implementing HiredScore's AI, and they combined that with a scheduling bot, one of the vendors that you may have met here. And so that was fascinating. It was a huge impact to their business. I mean, that's less than 50%. But the actually more compelling thing, and the one that they now focus on, was that 80% of the offers were generated within the first 5 days.
Wow.
So that was their key metric that they were focused on, was how many offers are we creating and what time period? Because if they focused on that, the time to fill would follow. And so I thought that was interesting, and sort of dissecting those to think about what kind of outcomes you can generate. So interesting. Certainly love to, from the audience, think about which metrics you're using. Are there any of them need changing? We hear a lot of people talking about quality of hire still as like this aspirational thing they want to solve. I know we've talked about it a couple times with this group. Any quick thoughts on quality of hire and how that's evolved?
Getting back to Greg's statement on time to fill, saying in a different way, our organization is very similar as far as looking at time to fill, but the focus is less shifted from that and more focused on time to start. Now, when you look at time to start and all the different components that go into time to start, I mean, on average now, if you hire a candidate that's currently employed, I mean, they're giving 30-day notices, especially in healthcare. That's pretty much the standard. And so our business executives are more interested in when are they actually starting versus how long it's taking you to fill the rec, if that makes sense. So that's one thing that we're, like I said, shifted our focus on in that aspect.
I think, Jason, one of the things, the quality of hire, right, seems like the holy grail of, TA, HR measurements that nobody knows how to. If you have a company of, where you can't name everybody at the company, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to do. But I think that's where you start to see these ecosystems like a Workday that then partners with HiredScore and some of the other vendors here that can do some stuff on the front end, where we actually have a chance, right? Because now you don't have this which was a candidate became an employee in like multiple different systems, and you're trying to connect the dot. And I'm really interested as we begin to move forward now in our relationship with Workday, and then the other tools that we have, that ability of actually measuring the quality of the source of the candidate, because that's where you start really making money. It's to go, oh wow, I don't go over here anymore because everyone wants me to go over here because someone went to that school or whatever it is, but it doesn't work. Here's something that we can go rinse and repeat, and then you can begin to also do the same thing internally.
Great. One thing we've heard from clients that they like is that you use the term holy grail. I think they all feel that way, but at least with one of the things the AI does was grade inbound applicants. When they get an A, B, C, D, it's not a quality of hire, but it's at least giving them a quality of that offer in a sense of, are we hiring close to what we're asking for? At the end of the day, we're hiring people, so they get to pick the ones they want. The AI is not making the decision, but at least they have a sense for how close were we to getting what we set out to look for, and using that, I think, in combination with some of the things like Source, that can be really enlightening. So we're gonna shift here. Tech is a key driver for change in this sort of area of innovation. So anything you can add around as you shift operating models, can you talk a role of how orchestration is helping you sort of disrupt traditional HRTA processes? Which maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, from the beginning, have wanted to be high tech, high touch, and a big part of that is, Southwest. We are a consumer-facing brand, and that's what we're known for is our culture and those frontline employees that you interface. And so we have to be involved with that. But just like, the perfect example for me is, if, you go to the airport and there's these self-check kiosks, right? So that took an employee, if you will, out of the mix. But what it really does is it allows the employees to focus on the customers of true need. So if you are, so instead of you standing in a long line to basically just get a boarding pass because that's all you need, you can go, you can still do that. We're not making you, but you can self-serve. And so we've just had a lot of focus on how do we be as high tech as we can, automate things, free up my team's ability to do more high touch things like back office, but also put some of the control of the process into the candidate's hands, for that ability to self-schedule and, do those types of things along the way.
I love that. Anything jump out to you?
Yeah, I mean, very similar in terms of really kind of reimagining the role of talent acquisition. A lot of the individuals in our team, whether it's a sourcer or a recruiter or even a recruiting coordinator, we've seen this evolution of what their responsibilities were to what they are. And I think that's even going to continue to change more as we continue to optimize our tech stack. It's been really important for us as we transform from a traditional automotive manufacturer to a technology company to ensure that we are able to attract the talent that we need to get us to the future. And so being able to evolve the roles within our TA team to better interact with our candidates, give them an incredible experience, but also ensure that our hiring managers have an equally great experience and everyone's time is spent well. I mean, that's been huge for us.
Great. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, Eileen mentioned the term experience, and one thing from a lessons learned perspective coming out of, like I said, COVID the last few years, is a lot of the strategies we put in place at that time, which, as you can imagine, were purely based on virtual interviewing, virtual hiring. The way our main form of communication during that time with our candidates was purely texting. Our text messaging went up like over 1,000% as far as how we communicate with our candidates. But the reason I bring all that up is because now that we've come out of it, we still have a lot of those same strategies in place, and we leverage the same type of technology or software that we're using then, we're using it now. And so it hasn't fully shifted back to, regardless of what any of our executives or leaders might think, where they're putting emphasis on back in person. We haven't found that out, especially when it comes to candidates. In fact, when we've surveyed our candidates, the responses have come back have been, I would say, definitely leaning more towards they like the interaction as far as texting still, as far as a form of communication, as far as conducting on-the-spot, live virtual chats with a recruiter. And so our strategy has shifted to incorporate that, as Greg mentioned, and continue to use that technology and really just build upon that moving forward. So it's more of a balanced approach. Before, during, as I said, the periods of COVID, it was purely virtual. And now we're still leveraging a lot of that technology, but it's just a little bit more balanced.
I love what Greg said about like high tech and high touch and how those combine. Couple observations, like where, again, trying to give you guys a little preview of how does AI tie into that. So one of the cool things with a product like we have called Fetch is it's recirculating candidates to apply. We hire one, we say no to 99, they're not all bad, and many of your companies have, these people are also your customers, point in case over here. And so you have to think about when we're saying no, is it not just no, but then how do we follow on to that promise? So it's really hard for a recruiter to remember, I really love so-and-so. How do I remember the next time a rec's open for that great person? How do I go back and find them? but you deliver that great kind of like Southwest kiosk experience when that person gets an email from a recruiter saying, hey, we remembered you, we thought you were great, and they didn't have to do anything, the AI surfaced that automatically. So it's a good example of how do you bring that to life with an AI use case. The data's already there, the people already wanted to work at your company, just bringing that back to life, for example. The other thing that in the high-tech thing, we've used this term a little bit, if it can be helpful to you, is when you think of AI, it's sometimes still scary, but we've been using the term of, rather than it being scary, we're giving recruiters an exoskeleton. So if you look at manufacturing, they've had exoskeletons for years. You work on a shop floor, you've got to repeat something, hundreds of times a day, and that can damage somebody's body, so they give them an exoskeleton to help execute that. Knowledge workers don't have that. So rather than the AI, recruiter being replaced by an AI, you're actually augmenting the human to actually do their work better. So it's not about scary, it's now about how do I help you do your job more effectively.
Yeah.
I really like that image. I don't know if that resonates for you all.
Well, and you mentioned fetch, which we love, but we're probably equally, if not more, in love with the reverse fetch function, because that's where you get really into really high touch with high tech supporting you in the back, right? So we interview somebody, we love to take our silver and bronze medalists with you and see if there's something else, right? And especially into some of those roles. And so to be able to interview somebody and go, if we would have had 2 spots, I'd be making this person an offer, right? And now I'm saying goodbye to them, and that I don't like that, right? And so for our recruiters on the spot, if you will, to be able to have done a reverse fetch and go, hey, Jason, you're actually a really good fit for this role as well. And, think this is dating Marcel's. We did that a little bit the other night. But, instead of being across from somebody on your team and you hand them a resume that says, hey, here's somebody, I think they're great, we're just now doing it, and they can do it sitting in completely different parts of the country, world, or whatever. But one of my recruiters could pass along somebody and go, we just interviewed them. We love great Southwest fit, great technical skill. They're a strong A match to your role, and it's a great experience for everybody, right? For not just the candidate, but a hiring leader when we talk about that speed, and then obviously the efficiency of your TA organization.
Yeah. Another interesting example for this group, so we have a client who, it would sound scary like we're getting rid of people. They took 10% of their jobs that they analyzed, a recruiter, a human doing the work, actually wasn't that valuable to screen the people, and they found out they could automatically push them to a hiring manager and let the hiring manager support that process. So we were talking about, Eileen took a car home last night that didn't have a driver, right?
Pretty cool.
It's kind of that version of driverless recruiting. But the interesting thing is the client didn't get rid of any recruiters. They just actually reallocated their capacity over here and had them focus on the roles where recruiting support was valuable. So again, it's not about replacing people, I think. The exoskeleton's a good way to think about that, this allocation, but where can you actually create, again, new operating models, create some of this self-service? It's really interesting to think about. I just challenge you to go back and start to ask, where could we do disruptive things? How could AI enable that? Really exciting. So we have one last question, then maybe a rapid fire. One of the things I think people is there's no shortage of cool things you'll see at these events. We were talking, somebody's like, I want that. I took a picture of that. I want to have that. So any advice you all have on when you go back to your executives and you say, hey, we saw all this great stuff, any ways that people can get better executive support for these initiatives? What kind of culture is sort of the right kind of culture to encourage innovation? I know we talked about this the other day as well.
Yeah. So for GM, it's been really interesting. GM is a heritage organization. We have a lot of individuals that have spent their entire careers there. As we transform, we're bringing in new leaders from new organizations that have different ways of thinking. And I think that for us has been bringing such valuable impact in terms of driving change, right? Being able to leverage technology to do things faster, more efficiently. And so I think the type of culture that you need to implement and get the change over the line, because let's be honest, change is really hard, right? Everybody is kind of a creature of habit. I think you need disruptors. I think you need leaders who are bought into doing something differently and are not afraid to tell that story and become your change champions and drive that down into the organization. Because if you try to implement this type of change in terms of completely modernizing or transforming the way that you recruit talent, it's really hard to do that if you have leaders that are not bought into doing something differently.
Love that. I think you were saying specifically you even brought in executives who were, coming from the tech industry and even your HR leadership.
Absolutely. It's
That's
been
really exciting. Tom?
Yeah, in fact, Greg and I had a conversation about this the other night, and anytime you're looking at implementing, let's say in this example, some type of technology, particularly AI, of course you're going to be asked by your CFO or leader, what's the return on that going to be? And a lot of times for those in the room that work in human resources, right, you'll get asked the question, well, how many people can we reduce, right, in our staff? And one thing I think that we need to focus a little bit more on is tying that back to ultimately who are our customers. So in healthcare, our customers are our patients. And if we can implement technology, for instance, that makes it easier for our frontline employees who are treating our patients, then that's really the ROI piece. It's not just data driven, it's focused on the experience. And you're probably sitting there wondering, well, how can you prove that? Well, in healthcare, it's very easy to prove. I mean, when you have scores related to your hospital safety ratings, as far as patient safety and everything else like that go up, basically we can tie it back to saying, well, yeah, because our clinicians have had more time to actually spend with the patients, right? They're not so bogged down on doing, let's say, some type of administrative work or anything like that. So we've been able to really, I'd say, holistically look at the whole picture now and tie it back to our in this case, our patients. And so it's a little bit more than just a cost saving and efficiency measure. It's more focused on the experience and the benefits that those experiences can have on other parts of the organization, particularly outside of HR.
Yeah. It reminds me that even just buying the solution is part of the challenge, but then getting the success. I think your company's great at, as an organization, at storytelling and bringing those stories to life. And I've seen clients do a really good job of taking the AI, which are like non-tangible use cases, and how do you tell a human story about that person who was rediscovered, who is now hired for a job. They wanted to work at your company and they were basically in the black hole, but they were pulled out as an example. I love that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories to tell. I think that was maybe our first QBR.
Yeah.
HiredScore came and told us about a candidate that had applied to a role, never left review status in Workday, right? So we do tend to get some pretty high volume on some of our roles, and so unfortunately we don't get to everybody as quickly as we love to do, but this candidate was fetched on a completely different requisition, different recruiter. Recruiter reached out, candidate applied, and from the time I think the candidate was fetched to the time they started was like 40 days or something. And that's somebody that we probably would never have engaged with. They didn't see the rec. They probably wouldn't have applied. But it was a great example of recirculating talent or candidates and keeping them engaged in your brand and getting them through the process as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I just think those stories are, when you get executive support, they're easy to translate those because they make it real. Anything culturally, Mooch, that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pieces, right, is, and it certainly affected all of us, but I'm sure everybody here, the pandemic really made a fundamental change to the world. And I think you've got sort of two different sets of individuals, folks that have realized that, and then ones that are sort of hoping things are going to go back to the way they were before, right? And so occasionally when I run into somebody like that, I will say, let's go find the DeLorean and we'll go back in time and see if we can figure that out. But that's just not the reality. And I've been in this space for 25 years, and the labor market that you are seeing now is not only not something that I've personally not seen, I've not read about it, I've not heard about it, and I've talked to multiple people worldwide. It's a worldwide thing that's happening, and it's moving so fast. And I think that's the challenge. That's, what I would say are for executives that are is to understand that. No, you don't need to go chase every shiny thing that's there, because that's a mistake as well. But you do need to understand that has fundamentally changed how you will interact with candidates. And if you aren't doing something about it, it's, if quality talent in a reasonable amount of time is fundamental to your business success, you better be listening to somebody that knows what they're talking about.
Love it. Well, we'll do a quick rapid fire round, and then maybe we'll see if anybody has any questions. So, real quick question. You don't have to put any too much thought in this one, but what is something that you're excited about that you think would change HR dramatically in the next 3 years? Or something you think that could be changing in the next 3 years, something to think about?
I would actually say, we've heard AI all throughout this conference, but my spin on AI is that there's so much emphasis on the efficiencies gained from it. And I think if we were to focus as well on the experiences gained from it, I think that's what I would actually, as I said, as an HR practitioner, be excited about.
Cool.
I think for me, what I'm really, really excited about is a fully integrated experience and ecosystem. We've done a lot of work in terms of trying to minimize the amount of places that you have to go to click a button. But I think the continued evolution of integrated ecosystems is what keeps me up at night. I'm super excited about that.
What do you got for us?
I'm a little different on this, and I think for me, especially when it comes to around the AI piece of things, I think everyone's really excited and continually asking, well, what can we do with it? I don't know that we're asking often enough, what should we do with it, or what we should not be doing with it. And what I'll say is, this whole conference and everybody here is talking about AI and how they can use it to be more efficient and all of the stuff they experience. Well, there's a whole nother side to TA, which is the candidate side of that. And what I'm worried, because I've already seen it happening, is who am I interviewing? Am I interviewing Jason, or am I interviewing Jason operating Chat GPT or anything like that that's not, and so I'm not getting that authentic person, or their ability to answer pre-screening questions, or who wrote their resume, and just all of that kind of stuff. And
Greg,
so
just checking real quick, you are you, right?
Today I am. Okay. Right. Yesterday I don't know that I was me.
Okay, all right, just making sure. I think that's cool.
But yeah, I think that's I think that's a piece of that we'll have to kind of be able to understand it and balance. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about for sure. All right, our friends, we have a couple minutes left. It's a small room. Anybody have any questions? These people hire, collectively, I don't know, probably over 100,000 people a year. So, power hitters here. Any questions for our panel that you'd like to be able to ask them? There's a mic there.
Yeah.
I have a loud enough voice for this room. I'll just say, if I'm late for my flight, it was well worth it. This was super.
Thank you.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I really hope I'm not.
We hope you're not late either.
Question? I didn't know if there was another question. Okay. Well, yeah.
So how do you do the eye touches, but how do you keep it personalized while still keeping the automation in? Like the Workday notifications, for example. You want to have them triggered, but you still want to provide that personalized experience. How do you manage this?
Yeah, so she was asking how to manage kind of that high-tech, high-touch piece, right? So I will give you a great example. I don't know how many years ago, so we hire flight attendants. We hire a ton. It's still a very popular position. We just posted this past Tuesday and got 13,000 applications in a 4-hour period, right? And in the olden days, if we were hosting this entire room would be filled for what we would call an info session. And the reason why we would do that is there's so much information that everybody in the room needs to hear the same thing, because it's not going to change, and to be able to answer those questions. What is the hours? What is training like? What are those types of things? And what we found is, as we kind of stopped doing that, well, now I've got 4 recruiters that are doing 10 or 12 whatever phone screens a day, saying the same thing for a 45-minute screen. They're doing 30 minutes of that same thing and actually not getting enough personal time. So now with some of this automation and those particular things, we can self-serve that up to those candidates so they're all reading the same thing. If it's not for them, they can opt out. But now, then when my team is able to talk to you, we're not repeating all the things that we need you to know about the role because they're not going to change, and we don't want you to show up for an interview or, by God, get hired and come to class and realize, oh, I didn't know I was going to be away from home. And it happens for that role sometimes. And so that's kind of where we would look at it, is where's those repeat things and what's cool about that is that the candidate can now do that on their own time, right? It isn't they have to come to something like this. They can do it at, Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or on a Tuesday night at midnight and get that information, which we've just have found has been really helpful.
Well, I know they're giving us the hook, so thank you much for the extra input. Hopefully that got you some great information. Thanks for coming for one of our sessions. We appreciate your time at the end, and hopefully you learned a lot, as you said, and I hope you make your flight as well. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.